Isabella's hand trembled as she pushed open the bedroom door. The sounds coming from within had already confirmed her worst fears, but nothing prepared her for the sight that awaited her husband Alexander, entwined with the stunning Veronica Kane in their marital bed. 6 months pregnant and standing in the doorway of their $50 million Malibu villa, Isabella's world shattered as she overheard their cruel words. Patience, baby. Isabella is too focused on her pregnancy and her little architecture projects to notice what's really happening. She's become so domestic, so boring. But Isabella was about to prove them catastrophically wrong. What they didn't know was that this betrayal would trigger not just a divorce, but the complete destruction of Alexander's empire. Like and subscribe for more gripping stories of betrayal, revenge, and empowerment. Join our community of fiction lovers for daily dramatic tales that will leave you breathless. The California sun cast golden rays across the infinity pool of the Sterling Beach Villa. A $50 million masterpiece perched on the cliffs of Malibu, the Mediterranean-style estate, with its sweeping ocean views and private beach access, had been the sanctuary where Alexander Sterling and his wife, Isabella, had spent their most precious moments together. Today, however, this paradise would become the stage for the most devastating betrayal of Isabella's life. Isabella Rodriguez Sterling sat in her Tesla Model S, her hands trembling as she gripped the steering wheel. At 6 months pregnant, her usually slender frame now carried the beautiful curve of their unborn child, a child she had dreamed of sharing with the man she had loved for 5 years. The architect in her had always been detail-oriented, but nothing could have prepared her for the details she was about to discover. The plan had been simple: surprise Alex for their third wedding anniversary weekend. She had secretly arranged for rose petals to be scattered throughout the villa, their favorite champagne chilled, and a private chef to prepare the meal where Alex had first told her he loved her. Isabella had even commissioned a custom piece of jewelry, a platinum watch engraved with the coordinates of this very villa, the place where he had proposed, with a breathtaking 10-carat diamond ring overlooking the Pacific. But as Isabella's car wound up the private driveway, her excitement transformed into confusion, then dread. Alex's black Lamborghini Huracan sat in the circular drive, but beside it was an unfamiliar pink Porsche 911 with vanity plates reading Vero 1. The sight made her stomach lurch. Though she tried to rationalize it away, perhaps it belonged to a client, or maybe Alex had bought it as a surprise gift for her. The villa's smart home system recognized Isabella's biometric signature, and the front door unlocked automatically. She stepped into the marble foyer, her designer heels clicking against the imported Italian stone. Everything looked exactly as she had left it, the original Monet hanging in the living room, the custom furniture she had personally selected, the family photos documenting their journey from dating to marriage to pregnancy. But something felt wrong. The air carried an unfamiliar perfume, expensive and cloying. Isabella's architect's eye noticed small details: a pink clutch on the console table that wasn't hers, champagne glasses on the terrace that hadn't been there yesterday, and most jarringly, the sound of laughter drifting down from the master suite. Female laughter, intimate, carefree. Isabella's heart began racing as she placed her hand protectively over her pregnant belly. The baby kicked, as if sensing her distress. She moved toward the sweeping staircase, each step feeling like she was walking toward the edge of a cliff. The laughter grew louder, mixed with music and other sounds that made her blood run cold. The master suite, their sanctuary, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, the California king bed they had chosen together. The walk-in closet where her wedding dress still hung was where the sounds originated. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, Isabella could see movement, shadows dancing in the afternoon light. What she saw next would be seared into her memory forever. Alexander Sterling, her husband, the father of her unborn child, was intimately entwined with another woman in their bed. The woman was stunning, long blonde hair cascading over her bare shoulders, perfect curves that belonged on magazine covers, and a laugh that tinkled like wind chimes. Isabella recognized her immediately: Veronica Kane, the Instagram influencer with 5 million followers, known for her luxury lifestyle content and modeling for high-end fashion brands. But it wasn't just the physical betrayal that shattered Isabella's world, it was what she heard them saying. "I love this villa so much more than that sterile penthouse," Veronica purred, running her manicured fingers through Alex's hair. "We should move here permanently after she has the baby, and we can get rid of her." Alex's response cut through Isabella like a knife. "Patience, baby. Isabella is too focused on her pregnancy and her little architecture projects to notice what's really happening. She's become so domestic, so boring. You understand me in ways she never could." Veronica giggled, a sound that once might have been charming, but now felt like nails on a chalkboard. "I can't wait until we don't have to sneak around anymore." "When will you tell her?" "Soon," Alex murmured, his voice carrying the same tender tone he had once used with Isabella. "The company's about to go public. Once the IPO is complete and the assets are properly reorganized, we can make this official." Isabella's hand flew to her mouth to stifle a gasp. IPO. Alex had never mentioned anything about taking Sterling Tech public. As a 15% shareholder in the company, a stake she had earned by investing her inheritance from her grandmother, she should have been consulted on such a major decision. The betrayal was deeper than infidelity. This was financial fraud. Her shock was compounded when she noticed details that made her sick. Veronica was wearing the silk nightgown Alex had given Isabella during their honeymoon in the Maldives. On the nightstand sat the bottle of Dom Perignon, 1996, that Alex had claimed was only for the most special occasions. Most painfully, the framed photos of Isabella had been turned face down and replaced with glamour shots of Veronica. Isabella's hands shook as she pulled out her phone and began recording. Her architectural training had taught her the importance of documentation, and her instincts told her she would need evidence of this moment. As she recorded, she caught more damning conversation. "My father will be so pleased when Sterling Tech finally merges with Kane Tech," Veronica said casually, adjusting her position. "He's been wanting to get his hands on your AI technology for years." Isabella's blood turned to ice. Victor Kane was Alex's biggest competitor, CEO of Kane Tech Corporation. If Veronica was feeding Sterling Tech's trade secrets to her father, this wasn't just adultery, it was corporate espionage. Alex seemed oblivious to the implications. "Your father's a brilliant businessman. Maybe we could work together once Isabella's out of the picture." The casual way he discussed erasing her from his life, their life, made Isabella's knees weak. She gripped the doorframe for support, and in doing so, accidentally knocked over a decorative vase. The crash echoed through the villa like a gunshot. Alex and Veronica sprang apart, and Alex's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, guilt, and then something that chilled Isabella to the bone: annoyance. "Isabella," he said, not even bothering to cover himself or show shame. "You're early." Veronica, rather than showing embarrassment, smiled with predatory satisfaction. "Oh, so this is the wife," she said, making no effort to hide her nudity as she stretched languidly. "She's bigger than I expected." The insult to her pregnancy was like a slap across the face. Isabella stood in the doorway, 6 months pregnant, wearing the sundress Alex had once said made her look like a goddess, now feeling utterly diminished. "How long?" Isabella asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "How long? What?" Alex replied with infuriating casualness, as if they were discussing the weather. "How long have you been sleeping with her? How long have you been lying to me? How long have you been planning to destroy our marriage?" Alex sighed, as if Isabella was being unreasonable. "Isabella, we need to talk, but not like this. Let me get dressed, and we can discuss this rationally." "Rationally?" Isabella's voice rose. "There's nothing rational about this. You're in our bed, with her, planning to steal from our company and discussing getting rid of me, like I'm some inconvenient obstacle." Veronica laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Honey, you were never really competition. Alex deserves someone who understands his world, someone who can keep up with him, someone who's not." Well, limited by biology. The reference to her pregnancy as a limitation sent rage coursing through Isabella's veins. You have no idea what you're talking about. Don't I? Veronica stood up, completely comfortable in her nakedness, and began dressing slowly, deliberately. I know Alex has been unhappy for months. I know he's been looking for a way out. I know he's already spoken to lawyers about divorce proceedings that would leave you with a minimal settlement. Isabella looked at Alex, hoping for denial, for some sign that this was all a nightmare. Instead, she saw confirmation in his eyes. Alex, she whispered, is this true? Have you already seen lawyers? His silence was answer enough. Veronica continued her psychological assault. I also know that your little architecture firm is struggling, that you've been using Sterling Tech resources to keep it afloat, and that Alex has been covering for you out of pity. This was a lie. Isabella's firm was actually thriving, but the casual cruelty with which Veronica delivered it showed how thoroughly she had researched Isabella's life, looking for weaknesses to exploit. Get out, Alex said finally, but he was looking at Isabella, not Veronica. Excuse me. Isabella couldn't believe what she was hearing. Get out of the villa. This isn't the time or place for this conversation. I'll have Robert Morrison contact you about the divorce proceedings. Robert Morrison was the most expensive divorce lawyer in Los Angeles, known for his ruthless tactics in protecting wealthy men's assets. The fact that Alex had already retained him meant this betrayal had been planned for months. Isabella stood there for a moment, processing the complete destruction of her life. Then, something hardened inside her. The architect in her knew that when a foundation was rotten, you didn't try to patch it. You tore it down and built something stronger. You're right, she said quietly. This isn't the place for this conversation. But Alex, you've made the biggest mistake of your life. As she turned to leave, she heard Veronica call out mockingly, don't forget to return the credit cards. Isabella walked down the stairs with as much dignity as she could muster, her hand protectively cradling her belly. She had parked her car in the driveway, but before leaving, she made one crucial stop: the villa's security room. As the person who had designed the villa's security system integration, Isabella knew exactly where to find what she needed. Hidden behind a panel that looked like decorative molding was the central server for the villa's surveillance system. She quickly downloaded the last 6 months of footage onto a portable drive, her fingers working with the precision that had made her one of Los Angeles's most sought-after residential architects. The files would show not just today's betrayal, but a pattern of deception going back months. They would also capture conversations about IPOs, mergers, and other business dealings that Isabella, as a shareholder, should have been informed about. As she drove away from the villa, Isabella caught a glimpse of Alex and Veronica on the terrace, sharing champagne and laughing. They looked relieved, as if her discovery had freed them from the burden of secrecy. They had no idea that their relief was premature. Isabella drove to her architecture studio in Santa Monica, a converted warehouse space that reflected her aesthetic philosophy: clean lines, natural light, and honest materials. She sat in her office, looking out at the Pacific Ocean in the distance, and made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't going to be the discarded wife, quietly accepting whatever scraps Alex's lawyers offered her. She was going to fight, and she was going to win. But first, she needed to understand exactly what she was fighting against. And as she began reviewing the surveillance footage, Isabella realized that Alex's betrayal was far worse than simple adultery. It was the foundation for a complex scheme of financial fraud, corporate espionage, and personal destruction that could land him in prison. And Isabella Sterling, architect, entrepreneur, and soon-to-be mother, was going to make sure that justice was served with the same precision with which she designed buildings. The war had begun. The Santa Monica architecture studio that had once felt like Isabella's creative sanctuary now served as her war room. For 3 days, she had barely left the converted warehouse space, surviving on delivery food and determination, while her assistant handled client calls with explanations of a family emergency. Isabella sat surrounded by printouts, legal documents, and multiple laptops, her pregnant belly making it challenging to get comfortable in any position. But discomfort was the least of her concerns. What she had discovered in the villa's surveillance footage was far more explosive than simple marital infidelity. The evidence painted a picture of systematic deception that went to the very heart of Sterling Tech's operations. Over 6 months of recorded conversations revealed that Alex hadn't just been cheating on his wife, he had been systematically defrauding the company, preparing for an IPO without informing other shareholders, and engaged in what appeared to be corporate espionage through his relationship with Veronica Kane. Marcus Chen arrived at the studio at 7 a.m. on Thursday morning, looking every inch the successful attorney he had become since their Stanford days. Tall, impeccably dressed, and carrying a titanium briefcase that probably cost more than most people's cars, Marcus was exactly the kind of legal firepower Isabella needed. "Izzy," he said, using her college nickname as he embraced her carefully, mindful of her pregnancy. "When you called, you sounded like you were planning to take down a government. I had no idea you meant your own husband." "Ex-husband," Isabella corrected firmly. "And Marcus, what I'm about to show you will convince you that Alex Sterling deserves everything that's coming to him." She led him to her conference table, now covered with organized evidence files. "Before we begin, I need you to understand something. This isn't about revenge. This is about justice. Alex has violated corporate law, securities regulations, and potentially federal statutes regarding trade secrets." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Those are serious allegations. Izzy, I hope you have evidence to back them up." Isabella smiled grimly and pressed play on her laptop. The first video showed Alex and Veronica in the villa's home office 3 months earlier. Alex was showing her Sterling Tech's proprietary AI algorithms on his laptop screen while they were both partially dressed. "These are the machine learning models that make our autonomous vehicle software so advanced." Alex's voice came through clearly. "Kane Tech has been trying to reverse engineer this for years." Veronica, clearly recording the screen with her phone, giggled. "Daddy will be so excited to see this. He's been wondering how you guys managed to get such accurate predictive modeling." Marcus paused the video, his expression serious. "Isabella, do you understand what we just watched? Corporate espionage," she replied. "Alex knowingly shared trade secrets with the daughter of his biggest competitor, knowing she would pass them to her father. This alone could result in federal charges," Marcus said, making notes. "What else do you have?" Isabella pulled up financial records she had accessed through her shareholder privileges. "Alex has been using company funds for personal expenses related to Veronica. Look at this $200,000 for her Porsche, $15 million for a Manhattan penthouse in her name, $500,000 for jewelry and luxury goods, all charged to Sterling Tech's executive entertainment budget." "Embezzlement," Marcus whistled low. "How much total?" "Conservatively, $50 million over 8 months. Marcus sat back in his chair. "Izzy, your husband isn't just cheating on you. He's committed enough federal crimes to earn him 20 years in prison." Isabella felt a grim satisfaction. "There's more. Remember how he mentioned an IPO in the villa? I've been reviewing Sterling Tech's board meeting minutes. Alex has been in talks with Goldman Sachs about going public for 6 months. As a 15% shareholder, I should have been informed of any discussions about public offerings." She pulled up email chains she had discovered. According to these internal communications, Alex has been telling potential investors that he has consolidated control of Sterling Tech. "He's been claiming my 15% stake as part of his controlling interest without my knowledge or consent." Marcus leaned forward, his legal mind clearly engaged. "Securities fraud. If he's misrepresented ownership structure to investors, the SEC will crucify him." "It gets worse," Isabella continued. "I found communication with offshore banking firms. Alex has been moving assets to accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. If the IPO goes through as planned, he was going to claim the company was worth far less than market value, buy me out at a fraction of what my shares are worth, then immediately go public." Marcus started calculating. If Sterling Tech is really worth what these Goldman Sachs valuations suggest, your 15% stake could be worth $2 billion, Isabella finished. Alex was planning to steal $2 billion from me by undervaluing the company before the IPO. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus stared at the evidence spread across the table, then at his college friend who had uncovered one of the largest corporate fraud schemes he had ever seen. Isabella, he said finally, you're not just looking at a divorce case. You're looking at a federal criminal investigation that could bring down one of Silicon Valley's biggest success stories. Isabella felt the baby kick, as if responding to the tension in the room. She placed her hand over her belly and spoke softly. Marcus, there's something else. Something personal that makes this even more complicated. She pulled out a medical file. Yesterday, I received some test results that I had ordered during routine prenatal care. Given Alex's behavior, I wanted to make sure everything was healthy with the baby. Marcus waited patiently as Isabella gathered her courage. The paternity test shows that Alex isn't the father. Marcus's eyes widened. Isabella, before you ask, no, I wasn't cheating on Alex. But remember Dr. James Wilson, my obstetrician about 8 months ago? Alex and I had a huge fight about his working late constantly. I was feeling neglected and emotional, and James was going through his own divorce. We had a brief relationship during our separation. I thought it was over, and when Alex and I reconciled, I believed our marriage was stronger than ever. She wiped away a tear. I never knew Alex couldn't have children, but yesterday, I found medical records in his email. He's been sterile for 3 years due to a childhood illness he never told me about. He knew this baby wasn't his. Marcus absorbed this information. So Alex has been knowingly raising another man's child while planning to divorce you and steal your assets. Worse than that, Isabella said, pulling up another email. He's been using my pregnancy as part of his timeline. Look at this message to his lawyer. Isabella will be more vulnerable and less likely to fight the divorce settlement while dealing with a newborn. We should finalize everything within 2 months of the birth. Marcus stood up and paced to the window overlooking the Pacific. Isabella, what Alex has done goes beyond criminal behavior. This is sociopathic manipulation on a scale I've rarely seen. Isabella joined him at the window, watching surfers catch morning waves. I want him destroyed. Marcus, not just defeated, destroyed. I want him to lose everything he cares about the way he planned to destroy everything I care about. Are you sure you're ready for this? Marcus asked. Taking on someone with Alex's resources won't be easy. He'll fight dirty. Isabella's reflection in the window showed a woman transformed. Gone was the trusting wife who had believed in fairy tale endings. In her place stood someone harder, more focused, more dangerous. I designed the security system that caught him, she said quietly. I built the software architecture that runs half his company's operations. I've been the silent partner in building his empire, and now I'm going to be the architect of its destruction. Marcus smiled for the first time since arriving. Then let's build a case that will make legal history. Over the next 4 hours, they constructed a strategy that was both comprehensive and devastating. Isabella would file for divorce, but simultaneously, Marcus would submit evidence to the SEC, FBI, and Department of Justice. They would request emergency injunctions to freeze Alex's assets, demand full forensic audits of Sterling Tech's finances, and seek criminal charges for securities fraud, embezzlement, and corporate espionage. But the masterstroke would be the press conference. We're going to go public before Alex knows what hit him, Marcus explained. In California, divorce proceedings become public record. We'll file all our evidence as part of the divorce petition, which means everything becomes available to journalists immediately. Isabella was reviewing the timeline when her phone rang. The caller ID showed Alex Sterling. She looked at Marcus, who nodded and gestured for her to answer while he started recording. Hello, Alex. Isabella, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days. Look, about what happened at the villa. You mean about you sleeping with your mistress in our bed while planning to defraud me of billions of dollars? There was a pause. Isabella, you're obviously upset, and you have every right to be, but you're not thinking clearly. Pregnancy hormones can make women emotional. Let's meet and discuss this rationally. Isabella felt rage building, but kept her voice steady. I'm thinking very clearly, Alex, clearly enough to know that you've been embezzling company funds, sharing trade secrets with Kane Tech through Veronica, and planning an IPO without informing me as a shareholder. Another pause, longer this time, longer. Isabella, I don't know what you think you know, but I know that you've stolen $50 million from Sterling Tech. I know you've been planning to undervalue my shares before going public. I know you've been feeding our technology to Victor Kane through his daughter, and I know you've been planning to time our divorce to minimize what I receive. You're making wild accusations. I have evidence. Alex, video evidence, financial records, emails, and documentation of everything you've done. The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When Alex spoke again, his voice had changed completely. Gone was any pretense of concern or affection. Isabella, you need to be very careful about what you do next. I have resources you can't imagine, and if you try to interfere with my business operations, you'll find yourself buried in legal proceedings that will last longer than our child's lifetime. Are you threatening me, Alex? I'm informing you of reality. You're a small-time architect married to a tech billionaire. If you think you can go up against me and win, you're delusional. Isabella looked at Marcus, who was still recording and taking notes. Alex, I have one more question for you. What? Do you know why Dr. James Wilson's name is on my speed dial? Confusion crept into Alex's voice. Your obstetrician? What does that have to do with anything? It has to do with the fact that he's the father of the baby I'm carrying. And unlike you, he's a man who takes responsibility for his actions. The phone went silent. Isabella could picture Alex's face, the realization dawning that his carefully constructed plans were built on a foundation of lies just as much as hers had been. You... Alex's voice was barely a whisper. I what? Alex, I had an affair. I was unfaithful. I lied. Isabella's voice rose. Yes, I did all of those things. But the difference between us is that I didn't systematically plan to destroy your life, steal your money, and betray everything you trusted me with. This conversation is over, Alex said coldly. No, Alex, this conversation is just beginning. Check your email in 1 hour. You'll find divorce papers, federal investigation requests, and evidence of every crime you've committed. And Alex, oh no. What? Turn on the news tomorrow at 2 p.m. You're going to be famous. Isabella hung up and looked at Marcus, who was grinning. That, he said, was beautiful. Did you see how quickly he went from fake concern to threats? He just gave us evidence of intimidation and harassment. Isabella felt the baby moving, active and strong. This little one is going to grow up knowing that their mother fought for justice, she said, placing both hands on her belly. Marcus began packing up the evidence files. Isabella, are you absolutely sure you want to go nuclear? Once we file these documents and hold that press conference, there's no going back. Alex Sterling's life, as he knows it, will be over. Isabella walked to her drafting table, where blueprints for a children's hospital she was designing lay spread out. The project was pro bono, her contribution to the community that had supported her business. It reminded her of why she had become an architect in the first place, to build things that made people's lives better. Marcus, she said, I spent 5 years building a life with a man who was planning to destroy me. Now I'm going to build something better from the ruins of what he tried to take away. She turned back to face him, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that reminded him why Isabella Rodriguez had been the most formidable woman in their Stanford graduating class. Let's destroy him. The Beverly Hills Hotel's Crystal Ballroom had hosted countless press conferences over the decades, but few as explosive as the one scheduled for 2 p.m. on this Tuesday afternoon. Isabella Sterling sat in the green room, checking her appearance one final time. She had chosen her outfit carefully, a tailored navy blue suit that commanded respect while accommodating her 6-month pregnancy. Minimal jewelry except for her grandmother's pearl earrings, and her hair pulled back in a style that said serious professional rather than scorned wife. Marcus paced beside her, reviewing his notes. Remember, Izzy, let the evidence speak for itself. Don't let emotions drive your responses to questions. We want to come across as seeking justice, not revenge. Isabella nodded, though privately she knew that justice and revenge, in this case, might be the same thing. Outside, the ballroom was filling with journalists from every major news outlet. CNN, NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox News, TMZ, Entertainment Tonight, and crucially, the financial press Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, Bloomberg, and Forbes. Marcus had crafted the media advisory perfectly. Major Silicon Valley scandal evidence of corporate fraud and securities violations at Sterling Tech. The tech press was particularly intrigued because Alex Sterling had been scheduled to ring the opening bell at NASDAQ next month for Sterling Tech's IPO. The timing couldn't have been more devastating. Isabella's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. James Wilson. Watching from the hospital. You're the strongest woman I know. Whatever happens, Daniel and I are proud of you. She smiled and placing her hand over her belly. They had decided to name the baby Daniel, after her late father. James had been incredibly supportive throughout this ordeal, never pressuring her about their relationship, but making it clear that he wanted to be part of their child's life, regardless of what happened between them. It's time, Marcus said, offering her his arm. They walked into the ballroom together, and Isabella was struck by the sea of cameras and reporters. She had given presentations to rooms full of clients and city planning committees, but this felt different. Today, she wasn't just Isabella Rodriguez, architect. She was Isabella Sterling, the woman who was about to bring down one of Silicon Valley's most celebrated CEOs. Marcus approached the podium first. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. My name is Marcus Chen, and I represent Mrs. Isabella Sterling in what may be the most significant corporate fraud case to emerge from Silicon Valley in decades. The room fell silent except for the clicking of camera shutters. Today, we are presenting evidence that Alexander Sterling, CEO of Sterling Tech, has engaged in a pattern of criminal behavior including embezzlement, securities fraud, corporate espionage, and conspiracy to defraud shareholders. Mrs. Sterling, who owns 15% of Sterling Tech, discovered this evidence while investigating her husband's extramarital affair. Marcus gestured to Isabella, who stood with quiet dignity at his side. Mrs. Sterling will present this evidence to you today, and simultaneously, we are filing criminal complaints with the FBI, Securities and Exchange Commission, and Department of Justice. Isabella stepped to the podium, and the room erupted with camera flashes. She waited for quiet, then began speaking in a clear, steady voice. My name is Isabella Sterling. For 5 years, I believed I was married to a brilliant entrepreneur who was changing the world through technology. Today, I'm here to show you evidence that the man I married is actually a criminal who has been systematically defrauding investors, shareholders, and the American public. She clicked a remote, and the first slide appeared on screens throughout the room, a photograph of Alex and Veronica Kane at the villa, clearly intimate. This is my husband, Alexander Sterling, with Veronica Kane, daughter of Victor Kane, CEO of Kane Tech, Sterling Tech's primary competitor. This photograph was taken at our private residence 3 days ago. The murmur that went through the room was audible. Isabella continued, what you're seeing is not just marital infidelity. What you're seeing is corporate espionage. She clicked to the next slide, a video still showing Alex's laptop screen, displaying Sterling Tech's proprietary algorithms, while Veronica filmed them with her phone. This video, recorded by our home security system, shows Mr. Sterling knowingly sharing Sterling Tech's trade secrets with Miss Kane, knowing that she would transmit this information to her father's competing company. The room exploded with shouted questions, but Isabella continued methodically. Over the past 8 months, Mr. Sterling has embezzled more than $50 million from Sterling Tech to fund his relationship with Miss Kane. The next slides showed financial records, purchase receipts, and bank transfers. A $200,000 Porsche, a $15 million Manhattan penthouse, $500,000 in jewelry and luxury goods, all purchased with Sterling Tech corporate funds and given to Ms. Kane as gifts. Isabella could see reporters frantically typing and calling their newsrooms. She pressed on. Mr. Sterling has been planning to take Sterling Tech public through an IPO without informing other shareholders, including myself. According to Goldman Sachs valuations we've obtained, Sterling Tech is worth approximately $50 billion. My 15% stake should therefore be worth $7.5 billion. The room went completely silent at the mention of billions. However, Mr. Sterling has been planning to force me to sell my shares at a drastically undervalued price before the IPO, then immediately go public at the true valuation. This would constitute securities fraud and theft of approximately $7 billion. Isabella clicked to show offshore banking records. To facilitate this theft, Mr. Sterling has been moving assets to accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland, hiding them from both shareholders and federal tax authorities. Marcus stepped forward. We have submitted all of this evidence to federal authorities and are requesting immediate criminal investigations. But Isabella wasn't finished. She had saved the most personal and devastating revelation for last. There is one final truth I need to share, she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to reveal. The child I am carrying is not Alexander Sterling's. The room erupted in chaos. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed frantically, and Isabella could see some journalists speaking rapidly into their phones. She waited for quiet. 8 months ago, Mr. Sterling and I were temporarily separated due to his increasingly erratic behavior. During that time, I had a brief relationship with Dr. James Wilson, my obstetrician. When Mr. Sterling and I reconciled, I believed our marriage was stronger than ever. Isabella's voice never wavered. What I didn't know was that Mr. Sterling has been medically sterile for 3 years. He knew this child could not be his, yet he allowed me to believe otherwise while planning to divorce me and steal my assets. She clicked to show medical records. Yesterday, I discovered that Mr. Sterling has been aware of his sterility and has been using my pregnancy as part of his timeline for destroying my life. According to emails we've recovered, he planned to finalize our divorce while Isabella is vulnerable with a newborn and less likely to fight the settlement. The silence in the room was deafening. Isabella could see shock on the faces of even the most jaded reporters. I am here today not as a woman seeking revenge, but as an American citizen demanding justice. Alexander Sterling has stolen from his company, betrayed his country's technological secrets, and attempted to defraud shareholders of billions of dollars. The fact that he is my husband makes this personal, but the crimes he has committed make this a matter of national importance. Marcus took the podium back. We will now take questions. The first question came from CNN. Mrs. Sterling, how long have you known about your husband's criminal activities? I discovered everything 3 days ago when I found him in bed with Ms. Kane at our Malibu villa. The investigation into his finances and business dealings has taken place since then. A reporter from the Financial Times asked, what is your response to the inevitable claim that this is simply a bitter divorce proceeding? Isabella looked directly into the camera. The evidence speaks for itself. We have video footage of trade secret transmission, documented financial fraud, and proof of securities violations. This isn't about a marriage. This is about crimes that threaten the integrity of American technology companies and capital markets. TMZ shouted out, what about the paternity issue? Are you planning to marry Dr. Wilson? Isabella smiled slightly. Dr. Wilson is a good man who will be part of his child's life. Unlike Mr. Sterling, he takes responsibility for his actions. As for marriage, I think I'll be focusing on being a single mother and successful businesswoman for the foreseeable future. Bloomberg asked the most pointed question. Mrs. Sterling, Sterling Tech's IPO was scheduled for next month. What impact do you expect these revelations to have? I expect Sterling Tech stock to be suspended from trading pending federal investigation. I expect the IPO to be canceled. And I expect shareholders to demand answers about how a company's CEO could embezzle $50 million without board oversight. As if summoned by her words, Isabella's phone began buzzing with news alerts. Marcus glanced at his phone and whispered to her, Sterling Tech stock has been halted by NASDAQ. Trading suspended pending investigation. Isabella felt a surge of satisfaction. The first domino had fallen. One final question, she announced, from the Wall Street Journal. Mrs. Sterling, what do you want people to take away from this press conference? Isabella looked directly into the cameras. Knowing that Alex was almost certainly watching, I want people to understand that no one, no matter how rich, how powerful, how celebrated, is above the law. Alexander Sterling thought he could destroy my life because he controlled more resources than I did. He was wrong. Truth is the most powerful resource of all. She paused, placing her hand over her pregnant belly. And I want every woman who has ever been betrayed, defrauded, or underestimated to know that you don't have to accept injustice quietly. You can fight back, you can win, and you can build something better from the ruins of what someone else tried to destroy. The press conference concluded with chaos as reporters rushed to file their stories and ask follow-up questions. Isabella and Marcus were escorted out through a back entrance, but not before Isabella caught a glimpse of the news alerts already hitting phones throughout the room. Breaking: Sterling Tech CEO accused of corporate espionage and embezzlement. Tech billionaire's wife reveals massive fraud scheme. Sterling Tech stock suspended amid criminal investigation. As they reached the parking garage, Marcus's phone rang. It's my contact at the FBI, he told Isabella. They want to meet immediately. Isabella nodded, then checked her own phone. 23 missed calls from reporters, 12 from lawyers, and 1 from a number she recognized: Alex. She didn't answer, but she did read his text message. Isabella, you have no idea what you've just done. This isn't over. She showed the message to Marcus, who photographed it with his phone. Witness intimidation, he said grimly. He just can't help making things worse for himself. Isabella looked out at the Los Angeles skyline, thinking about the little boy growing inside her who would soon be born into a very different world than the one she had imagined just a week ago. No, Alex, she said quietly. This isn't over, but it's about to be. Meanwhile, across town in the Sterling Tech headquarters, Alex Sterling sat in his corner office watching his empire crumble in real time. His assistant, Sarah Kim, had been fielding calls from reporters, investors, and board members for the past hour. The company's stock price had fallen 40% before trading was suspended. 2 board members had already called emergency meetings. The SEC had contacted the company's general counsel requesting immediate production of documents. Alex's phone rang. It was Robert Morrison, his divorce attorney. Alex, I just watched your wife's press conference. You need to get down here immediately. Can you make this go away? Alex asked desperately. Alex, she has video evidence of you committing federal crimes. She has documentation of embezzlement. She has proof of securities fraud. I'm a divorce lawyer, not a miracle worker. Alex looked out his office window at the city sprawling below. Just this morning, he had been one of the most powerful men in Silicon Valley. Now, he was facing the possibility of decades in federal prison. His other phone buzzed with a text from Veronica. Babe, my father wants to talk to you immediately. Something about damage control and plausible deniability. What's going on? Alex realized that he had been used by Veronica just as much as he had used Isabella. The difference was that Isabella had been smart enough to fight back. For the first time in years, Alexander Sterling felt genuinely afraid. And across town, Isabella Sterling was just getting started. 6 months after the press conference that destroyed Alexander Sterling's empire, Isabella sat in her new penthouse office overlooking Santa Monica Bay, nursing her 3-month-old son, Daniel, while reviewing the final settlement documents. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden light across the space she had designed as both a home and headquarters for her expanding architecture firm. Daniel James Wilson Sterling was a beautiful baby with his father's gentle eyes and his mother's determined chin. He had been born healthy and strong, arriving exactly on his due date as if he, too, understood the importance of good planning and precise timing. Dr. James Wilson sat across from Isabella, reviewing his own legal documents. Their relationship had evolved slowly and carefully over the past months. James had proven himself to be everything Alex wasn't: honest, supportive, and committed to being the best father possible. He had taken a position at a nearby medical practice to be close to his son, and Isabella had found herself falling in love with the man she should have chosen years ago. The final settlement came through this morning, Marcus announced, entering the office with a thick folder and a satisfied smile. Isabella, you are now officially the majority shareholder and CEO of Sterling Tech Industries. Isabella looked up from Daniel, who was contentedly sleeping against her shoulder. Majority shareholder. When Alex's personal shares were seized as proceeds of criminal activity, and when several board members sold their shares rather than face investigation, your 15% became the largest single stake. Combined with the shares held by employee pension funds who voted to support your leadership after the fraud revelations, you now control 51% of the company? Isabella shook her head in amazement. So the company Alex tried to steal from me is now your, Marcus finished. The board voted unanimously yesterday to name you CEO. Apparently, having an architect at the helm appeals to investors who want to rebuild the company's foundation on solid ground. James reached over to gently touch Daniel's tiny hand. What are you going to do with it? Isabella had been thinking about this question for months. Sterling Tech had been valued at $50 billion before the scandal. It was now worth approximately $30 billion after the criminal investigations and management upheaval. But it was still one of the most innovative technology companies in the world, with groundbreaking research in artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles, and renewable energy. I'm going to transform it, she said. Sterling Tech is going to become the first major technology company with a social responsibility mandate built into its corporate charter. We're going to focus on technology that solves real problems: affordable housing design, sustainable energy systems, healthcare accessibility. She looked down at Daniel, who had awakened and was gazing at her with serious dark eyes. I want to build a company that this little boy can be proud of when he grows up. Marcus pulled out another document. Speaking of Daniel, the paternity issues have been completely resolved. James is listed as the legal father on all documents, and Alex has relinquished any claims. How is Alex doing? Isabella asked, surprising both men with the question. Marcus's expression grew serious. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison last month. Securities fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, witness intimidation. The judge made an example of him, saying that tech executives need to understand they're not above the law. Isabella felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, satisfaction, but also a surprising touch of sadness for the man she had once loved. And Veronica, 3 years for corporate espionage and conspiracy. Her father's company, Kane Tech, is facing a $5 billion fine and potential criminal charges. The stolen technology has been returned to Sterling Tech. James shifted uncomfortably. Isabella, do you ever regret how things played out? The public nature of it all? Isabella considered the question carefully. The past months had been intense congressional hearings about corporate governance, SEC investigations, media scrutiny of every aspect of her life. She had become the face of corporate whistleblowing, testifying before Congress about the need for stronger oversight of tech companies. James, I could have taken a quiet settlement and disappeared. I could have accepted Alex's original offer of $10 million and started over somewhere else, but that wouldn't have changed anything. Alex would have continued stealing from shareholders. Veronica would have kept selling American technology secrets to foreign competitors. Other women would have been betrayed and defrauded. She stood up, walking to the window with Daniel still in her arms. By fighting publicly, We've changed corporate governance laws. We've strengthened penalties for securities fraud. We've made it harder for executives to hide assets offshore. Isabella turned back to face them. But most importantly, we've shown that victims don't have to stay silent. The Suckers Here Justice for Isabella hashtag wasn't just about me. It became a movement for women fighting corporate fraud, workplace harassment, and financial abuse. Marcus nodded approvingly. The Isabella Foundation has already helped over 10,000 women access legal resources. And the scholarship program, James asked. We funded full rides for 500 young women to study architecture, engineering, and computer science. Isabella replied proudly. We're building the next generation of women who won't be intimidated by powerful men. Daniel made a small sound, and Isabella kissed his forehead. This little one will grow up in a world where justice is possible, where truth matters, and where women know they can fight back against injustice. Marcus gathered his papers. Isabella, I have to ask any regrets about Alex personally. You were married for 5 years. Isabella walked to her desk, where a single photograph sat in a silver frame herself. James and Daniel at the hospital the day he was born. Gone were the glamorous photos with Alex, the red carpet events, the society page coverage. In their place was something real and honest. Marcus, I spent 5 years building a life with a man who was fundamentally dishonest. Every memory I thought was genuine was actually part of his manipulation. The romantic gestures, the declarations of love, the promises about our future, all of it was calculated to keep me from discovering his real nature. She paused, looking at Daniel. But you know what? If Alex hadn't betrayed me, I never would have discovered my own strength. I never would have learned what I was truly capable of. I never would have found the love I have with James and Daniel. James smiled, standing to put his arms around both Isabella and their son. So what's next for the Sterling family? Isabella laughed. Actually, I've been thinking about that. I'm considering going back to my maiden name professionally. Isabella Rodriguez sounds like a CEO who earned her position, not one who inherited it through marriage and scandal. And personally, James asked quietly. Isabella looked at the man who had stood by her through federal investigations, congressional hearings, and the complete transformation of her life. He had never asked for anything beyond the chance to be Daniel's father, but she had come to realize that he was everything she had thought. Alex was brilliant, honest, supportive, and genuinely committed to building something meaningful together. Personally, she said, I think Daniel needs parents who are committed to each other as much as they are to him. James's eyes lit up. Isabella, are you? I'm saying that when you're ready to ask the right question, I'm ready to give you the right answer. James laughed, pulling them both closer. I love you, Isabella Rodriguez. I love your strength, your intelligence, your courage, and your heart. I love how you turned the worst betrayal into the greatest victory. I love how you're raising our son to understand that justice is worth fighting for. He dropped to one knee, pulling a simple, elegant ring from his pocket. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend my life helping you build something beautiful and honest and real? Isabella looked down at this good man, holding their son, in the office where she had rebuilt her life from the ruins of someone else's lies. Yes, she said simply. Yes to all of it. As James slipped the ring onto her finger, Isabella felt Daniel stir in her arms. She looked down at her son, who would grow up knowing that his mother had faced down corruption and won, that she had refused to be silenced or intimidated, that she had turned a devastating betrayal into a force for positive change. Daniel, she whispered, your mom is going to teach you that there are two kinds of people in this world, those who build things up and those who tear things down. We're going to be builders. Marcus, wiping away tears he hadn't expected, cleared his throat. Well, this is beautiful and all, but I have news that might interest you. Alex's appeals have been denied. His sentence is final. Isabella nodded calmly. She felt no joy in Alex's imprisonment, but she felt deep satisfaction in knowing that justice had been served. And there's something else, Marcus continued. Alex asked to meet with you? He wants to apologize. Isabella considered this for a long moment. What do you think, James? I think, James said carefully, that you've already moved beyond needing his apology. But if you think it would help you find closure, I support whatever you decide. Isabella looked out the window at the Pacific Ocean, where she could see surfers catching waves in the distance. She thought about the woman she had been 6 months ago, trusting, naive, willing to believe the best in people even when evidence suggested otherwise. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. No, she said finally. I don't need Alex's apology. I don't need his acknowledgement of what he did wrong. I don't need his regret or his remorse. She turned back to James and Marcus, her family by choice and by love. What I need is to keep building something better. Sterling Tech, under my leadership, will develop technology that makes people's lives genuinely better. The Isabella Foundation will help women find their own strength. This little boy will grow up understanding that power should be used to help people, not hurt them. Daniel opened his eyes and looked up at his mother with a serious gaze that reminded everyone of his father's gentle wisdom. And most importantly, Isabella concluded, I need to teach my son that the best revenge against betrayal isn't destruction. It's building something so beautiful and meaningful that it makes what you lost look worthless by comparison. Marcus packed up his files. So what's the plan for Sterling Tech? Isabella had been developing ideas for months. We're going to partner with architectural firms around the world to develop AI-assisted design software for affordable housing. We're going to create renewable energy systems that can be integrated into any building design. We're going to make technology that helps people create homes, not just consume content. James smiled. Building things up instead of tearing them down. Exactly. As they prepared to leave the office, Isabella's phone buzzed with a news alert. Former Sterling Tech CEO Alexander Sterling's appeal denied. 15-year sentence upheld. She glanced at it briefly, then deleted the notification. Alex Sterling and his crimes were part of her past now. A chapter in her story that had led to something much better. Isabella Rodriguez, architect, CEO, mother, and soon-to-be wife, had more important things to think about than the man who had tried to destroy her life. She had a future to build. Epilogue: 1 year later, the groundbreaking ceremony for the Isabella Rodriguez Center for Women in Technology took place on a sunny California morning, exactly 1 year after the press conference that had changed everything. Isabella stood at the podium, holding 1-year-old Daniel while James watched proudly from the front row. This center will provide coding boot camps, business development resources, and legal aid for women in technology, Isabella announced to the gathered crowd of supporters, journalists, and dignitaries. But more than that, it will serve as a reminder that when we face injustice, we have a choice. We can be victims or we can be victors. In the audience, several women held signs reading, "Thank you, Isabella," and "Justice inspires us." Among them was Maria Santos, a former Sterling Tech employee who had used Isabella Foundation resources to start her own cybersecurity firm after reporting sexual harassment by her previous manager. "Mrs. Rodriguez?" a reporter called out. "How does it feel to be named to Time magazine's list of the 100 most influential people?" Isabella smiled, adjusting Daniel on her hip. "It feels like responsibility. Every honor, every recognition, every opportunity I receive means more women and girls will have examples of what's possible when you refuse to accept injustice." After the ceremony, Isabella and James walked through the completed building, state-of-the-art technology labs, comfortable meeting spaces, and a childcare center where women could bring their children while pursuing education and training. "You know what I'm most proud of," Isabella said, watching through a window as the first coding class began setting up their computers. "What's that?" James asked, holding Daniel so the toddler could see the activity below. "Alex tried to make me smaller, to reduce me to just the wife who should accept whatever he decided to give me. Instead, fighting back made me bigger than I ever imagined I could be." James kissed her cheek. "You were always this strong, Izzy." You just needed a reason to show it. Isabella's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Congressional hearing on tech industry accountability postponed until next month. They want your input on the new corporate governance bill. She replied quickly. Tell them I'll be there. Someone needs to make sure the laws have real teeth. As they prepared to leave, Isabella took one last look at the center that bore her name. In a year, she had gone from betrayed wife to CEO of a $40 billion company to influential policy advocate. She had written a best-selling book, spoken at dozens of conferences, and become the face of corporate accountability reform. But her greatest achievement was simpler and more personal. She had taught her son, through her actions, that justice was worth fighting for. Daniel babbled happily as they walked to their car, reaching toward the ocean visible in the distance. Isabella followed his gaze, thinking about the waves that constantly reshape the shoreline, sometimes gently, sometimes powerfully, but always persistently. That's right, baby, she said softly. Just like the ocean, we keep moving forward, we keep building, and we never stop believing that tomorrow can be better than today. As they drove away from the center, Isabella caught a glimpse of the headlines on James's phone. Sterling Tech stock reaches all-time high under Rodriguez leadership, and Isabella Rodriguez Foundation announces $500 million expansion. She smiled, thinking about how completely her life had transformed. A year ago, she had been a woman whose entire identity was tied to her marriage to a man who was systematically betraying her. Today, she was a force for change, whose influence extended far beyond any single relationship or company. Alex Sterling had tried to write her out of the story of her own life. Instead, he had inspired her to become the author of a much better story, one about justice, redemption, and the power of refusing to stay silent in the face of corruption. And this story, Isabella knew, was just beginning.